Dear colleagues, we are glad to introduce our work, Distance Learning in Primary School during the COVID-19 pandemic, results of the Smart Kids experiment. During 2020, throughout a prolonged quarantine caused by the COVID-19 pandemic, primary school teachers had significant difficulties in organizing distance communication with students. Firstly, they did not have sufficient skills to apply the distance learning form, DLF. It was a shock for them. And secondly, despite the fact that students of the 21st century are aborigines of digital technologies, they have not been taught to study by means of distance learning. In recent years, the systematic introduction of DLF in the educational practice of general secondary education institutions has not been observed. Educational policies did not encourage general secondary education institutions to introduce distance learning technologies. But in the context of the COVID-19 pandemic, DLF has acquired a new meaning in general secondary education institutions and needs additional attention and new research by scientists. The issue of teaching primary school students is a separate item, as the organizational and psychological and pedagogical aspects of teaching primary school students by applying DLF are not fully explored. In addition, during the weakening of quarantine measures period, it was decided that primary school students should study full-time in the classroom in most regions of Ukraine. However, this situation does not solve the problem of organizing DLF for primary school students, and postponing the problem only deepens it. In the period of 2017 to 2020, Ukraine witnessed the implementation of the project Smart Kids Technology of teaching primary school students. The order of the Ministry of Education and Science of Ukraine, dated from 30th of August 2017, the number is 1234, which is based on the method of using electronic educational resources and virtual teacher's office that can fully ensure the effective implementation of DLF in primary school. Let us consider the model of DLF organization in primary school using electronic educational resources and a virtual teacher's office. Is shown in the figure in the slide. The introduction of distance learning in primary school is based on the availability of electronic educational resources, EER, for grades 1 to 4 in Ukrainian language and mathematics of the Smart Kids company. Currently, the number of such resources is more than 52 units. Teachers and students download electronic educational resources to their gadgets one time at the beginning of the school year. The use of such resources does not require constant access to the internet. Distance form of learning, based on the use of EER, includes three main components: the organization of training, conducting online lessons, explaining new material or practicing skills by students, and monitoring the quality of independent performance of tasks by students. We will further detail in all the components. The main organizational components of distance learning in primary school include the presence of electronic mailboxes of participants in the educational process, means of video telephony or conferencing, electronic educational resources, electronic calendar, access to the internet. All participants in the educational process must be provided with the access to the internet, students at home and teachers both at home and in the institution. For online communication, teachers and students need to have the technical means, such as laptops, personal computers, or tablets. The implementation of online educational communication requires that the teacher be competent to use conference or video telephony, namely Zoom, Skype, Google Meet, Teams, etc. At the beginning of the school year, the teacher needs to form a database of email boxes of students to generate invitations to online classes. Organizational aspects include creating a schedule of online meetings with the students. According to the requirements of the sanitary regulations for schools, online class should last no more than 10 minutes for the first graders and no more than 15 minutes for the second and fourth graders. Therefore, a teacher should consider the following organizational aspects of the online classes: roll call of the students, explanation of a new material, consolidation of the studied material. The quality of the tasks performed by the students was assessed by 3 indicators. The task was performed correctly, the task was performed with 1 error, and the task was performed with more than 1 error. The pupil had the opportunity to redo the task. The motivation was the number of correctly performed tasks, as shown in this figure. The teacher was able to monitor the quality of the completed tasks in the virtual teacher's office and, if necessary, to assign an additional task to practice the necessary skills. While monitoring the students' academic achievements, the teacher was able to shape an individual trajectory of the students' development and provide for the development and consolidation of those tasks that the student encountered difficulties to complete. At the time of the large-scale COVID-19 pandemic, 94 primary school teachers took part in the experiment to introduce distance education in 12 regions of Ukraine. Namely, the first grade, 27.7%, second grade, 22.3%, third grade, 17%, fourth grade, 32%. A total of 2,454 students took part in the experiment. The distribution of students by grades can be seen in the figure in this slide. In the process of organizing the education of primary school students by distance learning, teachers used the following technical means: school and home computers. They also identified a mobile phone as an additional means of instant communication. An important aspect of any form of student learning is assessment. Under the normative documents of the Ministry of Education and Science of Ukraine, assessment in grades 1 and 2 is not recommended, but teachers, participants of the project, carried out constant monitoring of students' academic achievements through a virtual teacher's office. Moreover, they used additional services such as Kahoot, Viber, Microsoft Forms, Learning apps, and Google Forms to evaluate students in grades 3 and 4. As teachers were provided with electronic educational resources, it was important to find out the frequency of using EER during distance learning. You can see that in the figure in this slide. Analyzing the results, we found out that 90.3% of teachers used EER for teaching both continuously and periodically, and only 10% failed to apply EER due to problems with the internet. During the pandemic, 64.9% used EER to explain new material, 50% to test the learning material, 74.5% gave students additional tasks to practice skills. To ensure online communication with students, almost 28% of teachers used additional services, such as Zoom, Google Meet, Teams, and Skype. The authors also studied the role of EER in teaching primary school students. According to teachers, these were resources for practicing skills, 76.6%, for explaining new material, 64.9%, for monitoring the quality of completed tasks, 50%. 28.8% said that they managed to establish online learning communication and ask the students to speak in front of the class while performing ER. Teachers who, in the extreme conditions of transition to distance learning, took the opportunity to use EER to ensure the continuity of student learning, rated the quality of their own work as quite high, which you can see in the figure in this slide. To evaluate the results of the experiment, it was also important to summarize the teachers' opinions on the need of the use EER in primary school in the pandemic event. Thus, 66% of teachers estimated the need for such resources for primary school at 10 points, 7.4% at 9 points, 16% at 8 points, and 6.4% at 7 points. On average, teachers rated the importance of EER at 8.5 out of 10 points, which is an important indicator in the implementation of smart kids technology in educational practice, being an effective means of teaching primary school students. During the discussion of the situation with COVID-19 and the transition to distance learning, teachers outlined three main problems that hindered the effective use of smart kids' electronic educational resources. They are as follows. 27% of teachers acknowledged significant problems with the use of the internet. They noted unexpected disconnections and disruptions during online classes with students. 24% of teachers identified the problem of providing computers to students at some teachers. The provision of computer equipment has become prohibitively expensive for low-income families. 20% of teachers acknowledged the lack of government assistance in providing EER to all students in the classroom. Teachers raised the common problem: limited access to students' computers during complete isolation due to parents' online work. At the moment, the primary school system is not only in the process of completing the reform, but also in the process of benchmarking, finding a reference, cost-effective solution to effectively implement distance learning, adopting best practices, and implementing best pedagogical practices that will lay the foundations for primary school to provide quality education. Since EER can be used both in full-time and distance learning, the global experiment on the introduction of distance learning in the pedagogical practice of primary school teachers within the framework of the Smart Kids technology of teaching primary school students experiment is a positive example of providing continuous and high-quality student learning. Thank you for your attention.